This is Decision 2023, a debate for Sullivan County Legislature, being brought to you from the Black Library in Monticello. I'm Mike Sickel, News Director for Catskills News. I'd also like to thank our news partner, Mid-Hudson News. This is an opportunity to hear from candidates in the 7 contested races for legislature on a number of platforms, including Catskills News Talk 92.5 and 94.9, as well as MidHudsonNews.com, plus Mid-Hudson News YouTube channel and the Catskills News podcast. Laborers Local 17 is a proud sponsor of Decision 2023. Feel the strength of thousands of diverse tradespeople working with contractors to recruit and train highly skilled, safe, and productive laborers constructing Sullivan County's water, sewer, roadways, and energy infrastructure. Earning great wages, health care, and a pension. Feel the power of a career with Laborers Local 17. Visit liuna17.com to start on your career path today. Both candidates have been provided with a format for the Decision 2023 debate, and we are ready to begin. I hope we will have a spirited, informative, and civil debate on some of the issues that are facing local voters. Now, the format will consist of 4 segments with 4 questions each. Candidates will have up to 2 minutes to respond. That'll be followed by a minute for a rebuttal from the opposing candidate. There are opening and closing statements. Each candidate is allotted up to 2 minutes. Let's begin with those opening statements by coin toss. Our first candidate is Kat Scott in District 5, running on the Democratic and Sullivan United lines. Kat Scott has lived in Sullivan County for most of her adult life, moving here as an infant, a graduate of SUNY Sullivan. She currently leads the client services team for Delaware River Solar, a Callicoon-based community solar provider. She's volunteered with the Jeffersonville GEMS, Friends of the Western Sullivan Public Library, the Delaware Youth Center, and the Jeffersonville Area Chamber of Commerce. She's active in the Family Council of the Care Center at Sunset Lake. Kat Scott, your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First, I'd like to thank Mike Sickel for moderating today's debate, Bold Gold Media and the Mid-Hudson News for providing this opportunity, and to my opponent, George Conklin, for his participation. Sullivan County has been my home since I was an infant. My parents moved upstate looking for a better way of life and found that here in Sullivan County. Growing up in this tight-knit community helped form the person that I am today. I've had a long and interesting professional life here in Sullivan County. My early career began in health and human services, working with addicts and alcoholics. I moved on to work for several small local businesses as a small business strategist. And as Mike said, today I'm currently the Director of Customer Experience for Meadow Energy, which is a community solar firm in Callicoon. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm passionate, honest, and hardworking. I'm dedicated and steadfast in the work that I do. I have spent the last 3 years following this legislature closely, attending legislative meetings, reviewing agendas, and reading resolutions. I know the issues facing Sullivan County and its people. I will be a strong advocate for the people of District 5 who are facing real problems such as this opioid crisis, a housing crisis, a lack of opportunity for our youth, all things this current legislative administration hasn't been adequately addressing. I will work to correct the mismanagement of this current legislature, such as what we've seen happen out at the Care Center at Sunset Lake. They've turned a once 4-star facility into a 1-star facility with an almost $400,000 tax burden to the taxpayers of Sullivan County. I know firsthand the damage done to this facility. My mother is living the consequences. Being a county legislator is an important job, and right now the stakes are high. I will work hard for the people of District 5 in Sullivan County. I'm asking you to hire me with your vote. I'm Kat Scott, and I want to work for you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is incumbent legislator George Conklin, running on the Republican line. And George Conklin is a lifelong resident of District 5, now living in Hankins for over 30 years. Conklin has served the community in emergency services and has been a New York State EMT for over 15 years. Conklin has served in politics in many capacities, serving 8 years as Town of Freemont supervisor and budget director, as well as 8 years as Town of Freemont town councilman. As an incumbent legislator, he serves as chairman of the Management and Budget Committee and the Public Works Committee. Your opening statement, George.
Okay, I also would like to thank Bold Gold Media and Mid-Hudson News, the Black Library and Local 17, and you, Mr. Sikel, and as well as Catherine for taking part in this discussion, debate. I feel that everybody has an obligation to give to their community in some way. I've done that my entire life, donating time to the youth center. I was a chief, line officer in 2 fire departments, captain and president of the ambulance corps. And as Mike said, I served a combination of 16 years on the town board. In my 4th year as a legislator, I've had the pleasure of being chairman of management and budget and also being the chairman of public works. In those capacities, I've had the great fortune of working with Mr. Ed McAndrews, the DPW commissioner, and Nancy Buck, the county treasurer. In that capacity, we have not raised taxes significantly. We've paved the most miles of road, I believe, in the history of the county this year. We have also paid off debt early, did away with the unpopular garbage tax early, and we also have built up our surplus to a healthy point, to the point that the comptroller's office gave us the highest level of no designation as far as fiscal stress goes. So the county is in the best position it's been in my adult life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And you get the first question. And I'd like to talk about a recent issue. Of course, you know, the Sullivan legislature recently agreed on the distribution of those opioid settlement funds after a few heated discussions, of course, such as focusing on education and a younger population. So my question to you is, what would your goals be on funding of substance misuse programs? What are your feelings on that?
Obviously, something needs to be done. We have the opioid task force, and we have some great people there who are administering the monies. Our job is to make the money available and appropriate it. As far as me dictating how that's done, I'm not interested in doing that because I'm not a professional. I do think something has to be done. I would like to work on prevention, and I also think a good portion should go to prosecution. What we really need, in my belief, is we need a detox unit. You can't treat these addicts unless you detox them and get them off the stuff. To give them heroin light or whatever the stuff is, Suboxone, just prolongs it and they'll be on it forever in my eyes. So I think you have to detox them. I feel very strong about that. I'm sure it's not a pleasant thing to go through, but since I've never taken this stuff because I know better, I'm maybe a little harsh on that. I do believe in this opioid settlement. I'm sympathetic to it because it's near and dear to me because my mother was hooked on them because of the doctor. They prescribed them to her and she got hooked on them. And she had to detox 2 times that they gave them to her. And there are a lot of people out there who've had that same experience where a doctor gave it to them and got them hooked on it, and then they resort to getting them in an illegal manner. I'm very sympathetic to those people.
Very good. Well, Kat Scott, your rebuttal as far as funding of substance misuse programs, some priorities?
Priorities definitely go into prevention and education. Even Sheriff Schiff has said that we can't arrest our way out of this crisis. One of the things that I've heard from providers in the community working with people addicted to opioids is we need supportive services. When I worked with addicts and alcoholics, it wasn't just about detox and it wasn't just about mitigating their addiction. It was about understanding how they came about this addiction. We don't have adequate mental health services in this county. We need more job training so that when people do find sobriety, they have a path out. They have a path to success within their sobriety, and we need more supportive services. Right now, we're treating with medication, but we're not treating people in this path of sobriety, which is understanding how they can stay clean day after day after day. And right now, this legislature has failed to support those folks in their journey with sobriety.
Well, and staying on the topic of mental health, since the next question is yours, Kat, there's been, of course, the increase of mental health crisis in Sullivan County. I mean, it's actually a national issue. But what do you think, as a legislator, what would you say can be done to alleviate the lack of space, the lack of available services for mental health?
I think we should be working with the state to find additional funding. We should be advocating in every avenue that is in our grasp. We need to multiply the amount of providers that are in this county. Right now, we are woefully under staffed with the mental health providers in this county. A friend of mine is a neuropsychologist here in Sullivan County, and he's telling me how we have this overarching need for mental health services. So as a legislator, we need to attack this on both the public and private sides. We need to attract additional providers here to the county in the private sector, but we also need to shore up our services through community services. My aunt actually used to work in community services as a secretary. Sullivan County has a strong history of providing good services to the people here, and somehow over the years we've lost track of that, and we need to get back to that. We need to invest in the people of Sullivan County because that's one of our most precious resources.
And George's rebuttal on the issue of mental health and mental health spaces, available services. What can the legislature do?
I believe that it's true. We do need to do more. It's on the state level, 20 some years ago, they started closing all the facilities where they house these people. And I'm very sympathetic to it because I don't believe anybody, unlike the opioid problem where people choose to take a drug, someone who has mental health issues doesn't choose to be that way. I believe they need to be dealt with in a compassionate manner, and I do believe we need more facilities to handle this. Unfortunately, New York State has basically caused this issue. Our prisons are full of inmates that have IQs of 80 or less, and they don't belong incarcerated. They really need help.
Well, and as a follow-up question, or you get the next question, as a current legislator, another issue recently was the meeting with Garnet Health officials.
Yeah.
You met with the president and CEO of Garnet Garnet Health, as well as Garnet Catskills here. And after several cutbacks that have taken place, after claims that, ambulances were actually told, ambulance service providers, and you might know this personally, were actually told to transport cardiac patients to Catskills Orange and not use our local facilities. Do you feel comfortable with their assurances? There was a press release that was put out by the legislature as a whole saying that the meeting had taken place. Are you comfortable with the assurances coming from Garnet Health Administration that we have the services, the support that we need here in Sullivan County?
Yeah, I am. Our healthcare industry is suffering around the state and even the country. Nurses, there's 25 slots in the program at SUNY Sullivan. They have 100 applicants, and they can only train 25 of them. The healthcare industry is really strained. COVID was a big part of it, especially New York State mandating that these healthcare workers get the shots, and a lot of them left over it. I think that has hurt our healthcare. The matter is, do I feel comfortable? What they told us? Yes. They're very forthcoming, and they're actually working on building a new facility if they can. And that made me feel pretty good to have a state-of-the-art facility. I dealt with Callicoon Hospital in the days when I used to call from a residence to see if there was a doctor on hand. And that was very upsetting because they would say, no, come in, we'll call a doctor when you get here, and then you wait a half hour. I said, no, we can't do that. Now Callicoon is one of the premier facilities in the area. They have resources that I never dreamed possible with a CT scan. They really have done an exceptional job. And I think if the shortcomings that exist at Orange Regional and Harris, I believe are fixable, and I believe they're working on it. They've restructured heavily, and I do feel comfortable with them.
Well, and Kat Scott, your rebuttal as per local healthcare services.
Healthcare nationally is in trouble. We do know that. Our healthcare systems are under strain. That's why we need a strong local advocate, especially on the western end of Sullivan County, advocating to retain services. Callicoon Hospital is a gem, but they don't offer the services they used to. You used to be able to, I think you can still go get a blood draw, but they used to have lab services, and they've reduced services, just like they've reduced services at the Harris location for Garnet Catskill. My mom, unfortunately, is a regular at the hospital, and I've seen the changes over the years, and it is troubling. One of my jobs many years ago was to work for a urology practice, Dr. Spiro and Dr. Richter, and we used to have all the specialties here, and we used to provide for our own. I'm not 100% comfortable with what Garnet Health has announced, and I think that we really have to watch what's happening. We need to protect our healthcare resources in this county, especially for our elderly and especially on the western end of Sullivan.
Well, and Kat Scott, the next question is yours. And there's no doubt if I start with a line, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the care center at Sunset Lake. There is continued public outcry during many legislative meetings that the county take back the control of the facility. So the question is it time to dispose of the Infinite Care contract? Is that what you would look at doing as a legislator?
I would answer that with a resounding yes. Infinite Care has failed over the last 2 years in maintaining a certain level of care for the residents of the care center at Sunset Lake. And I know this personally. My mom has been a resident for 6.5 years. I was always happy with the care that she received. Over the last 2 years, my mother has broken her hip, and the state has investigated and found that the facility was at fault. My mother has been to the hospital multiple occasions for dehydration, and my mother over the summer has suffered with not 1, not 2, but 4 bed sores. The staffing is inadequate for their admissions policy. As the vice president of the family council, we meet with the administration once a month, and I do not have any faith that this is patient-centered care or resident-centered care. What's happening in the care center is criminal. And I don't say that lightly. The people in this county who built these communities, who have supported these systems, who now in their time of need a safe place to go, deserve better than they're getting at the care center. I'm not going to lie and say I know what all the answers are, Mike, but I know Infinite Care is not the answer. They are profiting off of the residents there. They have transferred services to companies that I can only assume they have investment in, including getting rid of local providers like Family Foot Care, not sending lab out to the hospital. My mother had lab work done, and 2 days later she was having a health issue, and they could not provide me with the results of that blood work because their lab had not processed it. I had to request my mother be sent out to the emergency room where she was a resident in the hospital for 8 days. Infinite Care is not the answer. And they have taken this facility from a 4-star facility to a 1-star facility with a consumer alert for abuse. It's time to take that facility back for the residents of Sullivan County.
Well, and George, as a current legislator, then there's been so many discussions on so many different levels. As your rebuttal, what are your feelings on the care center at Sunset Lake?
Well, I have here numbers that I've gotten from 2018 when the care center was in the red, and these are taxpayers' dollars, $4.3 million, to now in 22, which was last year, to $17,061,000. Because the days of single-owned facilities in New York State are over, and you have to own multiple facilities, They have procurement power. They have other resources, and this is what they do. I'm very sorry for the troubles Catherine's mother has had. I don't feel that they are not doing the right thing. And the overall care in the care center is at a 3. Short-term care, which didn't exist before, is at a 3.
That's not true.
And you can
That
look
is
that
not
up
true.
on Medicare.gov.
Very good. Well, we move into our next section where we flip the order. So, Kat Scott, I will come back to you. And we'll move on to some public safety issues. In particular, it's a topic, of course, that's on the national stage as well. Here in Sullivan County, do you feel that local law enforcement has the tools it needs to keep the public safe?
Yes, I believe that our local law enforcement do a really good job. What I would say, though, for the Sheriff's Department is that we have a hard time retaining deputies because we don't pay our deputies enough, and that's a problem throughout Sullivan County government. Sullivan County Sheriff's Department loses their deputies to other local police departments within Sullivan County and to Orange County, which pays about $20,000 more per year. So if we were going to talk about local public safety, then I would talk about, how we're reimbursing the people who are doing the job and making sure that they're being paid a fair and adequate wage. Other than that, I think that the Sullivan County Sheriff's Department does a great job, as do some of the other local police departments. I'm not going to pretend to know what the Village of Liberty Police Department or Monticello is operating under, because that's not in my jurisdiction. But yes, I feel like we've done a good job.
Well, and George, again, in terms of public safety, do you feel local law enforcement has all the tools it needs here in Sullivan County, doing the job?
I believe they're well funded. We did settle 2 contracts, CSEA, PBA. The upper management confidential were just given raises. I believe they're being paid almost commensurately with the surrounding police departments. I do not know of anyone leaving recently to go to other departments. No one has reached out to me, and I have multiple friends who work for the Sheriff's Department, whether it be in the jail or on the road. As far as their funding, you could always fund more, for sure. We have talks all the time about what they need and if they need more. We're meeting with the district attorney tomorrow morning to talk about his budget and what they need. So I think it's good, and I think the sheriff does an exceptional job.
Well, and since you get the next question, I'll ask you what your feelings on bail reform are. I mean, do you feel that the adjustments that have been made on the state level are enough adjustments to the court system? Are they adequate right now?
I think that was a total mistake. You're turning people back out on the street. I don't know anybody who would tell you that they think bail reform was a good idea. It's ludicrous. I understand the people who spit on the sidewalk or maybe did something that wasn't earth-shattering, okay, don't fill up the jails. But what they're doing, they're turning people that are violent criminals loose, and they're repeat offenders. I think there's over 50% of the crimes that are being committed in this state that are repeat offenders who were out on bail reform. They were out on the street and they should have been incarcerated. And that's totally wrong. I think that is a huge problem in our state. That the intent of the bail reform was not to just turn violent criminals loose on the street so that they can harm our good citizens. And last time I campaigned on good roads and safe streets. And I got to tell you, bail reform does not help safe streets by any means. Our jail that they built at $90 million, it's half empty because the criminals are out on the street. They're not in jail where they belong. So I have a big problem with bail reform. I think it was a bad idea. They didn't think it through, and unfortunately they're unwilling to revisit it, because if you talk to judges, law enforcement, they'll all tell you the same thing. This bail reform that they did was a horrible, horrible idea. Raise the age, all that, and it's costing us so much more money to prosecute these things because you have to have multiple facets of attorneys to deal with the crimes, and it's really a bad idea.
Kat Scott, rebuttal on bail reform?
Well, I'd like to point out something that Mr. Conklin brought up before earlier about mental health. Even he admits that a lot of the people suffering from mental health issues are ending up in prison. So what we're seeing is a lot of people with mental health issues who aren't being served, who are getting arrested and being turned out, and getting arrested and being turned out. But I would like to go to the meeting that Mr. Conklin is having with the district attorney. The district attorney's office has a slot for 10 assistant district attorneys. Their starting pay there is $72,000. The county attorney's office starts pay at $90,000, and the county attorney's office has poached 3 assistant district attorneys into the county attorney's office. So if we're concerned about law and order, then we need to be funding our district attorney's office. Former district attorney and now New York State Supreme Court Justice Megan Galligan went before this legislature and made a plea to help her with her office, and now acting District Attorney Brian Conity is making that same plea. So if we're serious about law and order, then let's be serious about paying our assistant district attorneys.
Kat Scott, next question, and I wanted to talk a little bit about taxes and affordability. Of course, Sullivan County, over the past couple of years, certainly since the COVID pandemic, was able to survive economically with a series of state and federal payments, certainly helped the balance sheets. Now New York State has begun reassessing how certain payments are made, in particular Medicaid, are being calculated. So what do you think that we should do? What do you think the legislature can do to keep our county affordable and tax increases at a minimum?
Well, we should be advocating to the state with this Medicaid reimbursements because it's just not sustainable what's happening. We have a big problem here in Sullivan County. People who live here can't afford to live here much longer between the cost of housing, the taxes. I've had somebody tell me recently that they live in a house that they don't have a mortgage on, but they're having a hard time affording their taxes, and they live in a village, so they have taxes on top of, property tax and school tax. That's a real problem. And this administration is boasting how well the budget is and how well the economy is. And what I would argue is that while they haven't really raised taxes by much, they have reduced service and they've reduced the quality of service. That's another problem. And that's something that affects people's decision about whether or not to stay in Sullivan County. What services are being provided to them? Can they age here in Sullivan County? Can they afford to live here in their golden years? Between the taxes and the lack of service, it's a real problem. And if we don't do something, we're not going to have the local population that we have. So yeah, the Sullivan County Legislature needs to investigate all available options to them, including advocating to the state, possibly advocating even beyond, to see how we can fix this problem. We also need to look at the type of housing we have here for folks, the quality of housing, and the cost of housing.
Very good. George, a rebuttal on that issue?
Yeah, there is a housing issue for sure. We have problems with bringing in professionals to the area. I know BOCES and the county has had issues with hiring professional people because there is a lack of housing, which is due to the short-term rentals, or second homeowners. I don't know that we have a magic pill for that. You have home rule, which are your townships, which they sail the ship and steer it in which direction it goes. We're doing the best that we can. The legislature is not the end-all be-all for everything, and as far as New York State with clawbacks in the Medicare code, we have to reach out to our state lawmakers to change that. I don't think you're going to see it, and financially we're setting ourselves up to be prepared for it.
Well, and George, you get the follow-up, the next question. On the housing issue, again, besides the fact that it's difficult to increase residential housing here, construction to happen, and I know you've mentioned that it's a town issue and zoning issue, of course, but can something be done at the local level to correct the affordability problem? As affordability seems to be the issue that many people are talking about when it comes to housing.
Well, when you have gentrification of an area, which is what we have, We're an hour and a half, 2 hours away from a major metropolitan area. The good sides of it is that a lot of people there. You've got 8.5 million people in the 5 boroughs. They are moving north, or they're coming, and we're their playground. Well, that's wonderful. Service industry, sales taxes. Sales taxes now eclipsed property tax in funding the budget, which is why there's not been any significant tax increases. This is a growing pain of an area that's a bedroom community / short-term rental visitor place. Basically, you have people who are wealthy enough to afford the housing and will pay a premium because it's cheap by Manhattan standards. And then you have people like myself, who's in the service industry as a carpenter, working for these people. And it is a struggle to afford housing. I bought my place 24 years ago. I struggle. I'm a taxpayer, and as a sitting legislator, it does not pay your way. My bulk of my income comes from the private sector still, and it always has. I don't know the exact answer to how you fix the housing, other than families trying to keep houses in there and buying up stuff when it comes up, if you can afford it. I really don't know. There's no magic wand to wave to solve this issue. There really isn't, unless you're talking about getting into, low-income housing or something, and that's generally not a slope that anybody wants to go down.
Kat Scott, rebuttal on housing affordability?
I wouldn't remark of it as a growing pain, because that pain is being felt by a lot of local families. Their children are going off to college or going off to trade school, and they're not able to come back here. They can't afford to live here. That's a real problem, because then we start losing some of our cultural identity if we start losing those people. We should be working on ways to make it a little bit more fair for local people to live here, which includes maybe looking at our job market and creating a more versatile job market, more versatile industry. The tourism industry is great, but one of the things we all know is that when the national economy takes a hurting, so do we. We're the first ones to feel it, and we're the last ones to get relief from it. So we need to be forward thinking and look out for industries that are a little bit more sustaining and offer people good paying jobs. Agriculture, once upon a time ago, really built this community up. We know that farmers support main streets, and right now I don't know if we're supporting our farmers enough. As Mr. Conklin said, we're an hour to 2 hours away from a major metropolitan area. We could feed them. So we need to look at different ways that our local people can make money so that they can afford to live here.
Very good. And Kat Scott, you have the next question in our third segment here. Let's focus on young people. Okay. What do you feel is the best way to attract or retain young people to remain in the county as part of the local workforce?
I think the best way to attract and retain young people is to provide them with a place that they can afford to live. A lot of young people, especially if they go for higher education, are getting that degree with a tremendous amount of debt. And they need to factor that debt into their living expenses as they move forward. We need to make sure that they have jobs. There are jobs available here, that they have a source where they can make money that they can afford to live. So we have to provide them with a place that they can afford to live and a way for them to make money so that they can afford to be here. There's a lot of young talent that is produced here in Sullivan County. And in the course of my lifetime, I have seen it. We have really smart, resourceful people. And they're rooted to this community. They love this place. Their families, some of them are multiple generation. We want that to come back. We want to attract that back, and we want to see what they have to offer us as we build this community up.
And George, rebuttal as retaining young people, bringing young people back to Sullivan County for the workforce?
Well, going back 10 or 15 years ago, there was a piece done on it, and I believe 70% of the young adults that live in rural areas don't stay there. They go to urban areas because the big push has been go to college, become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. financial analyst, computer person. So those jobs generally are in your urban areas. So part of what you're up against is just, it's a fact of life in the country. The other thing is, you got to try and provide tools for them. Like I said, we're in a service industry. I've worked as a blue collar worker my whole life. I worked as a busboy when I was a kid. I was a porter in a restaurant, and I've done carpentry for almost 40 years. I chose to stay here because I was given the chance to learn a trade.
Well, and as a follow-up question along those lines, would you expand on local partnerships with institutions such as SUNY Sullivan, Sullivan BOCES, organizations such as the Sullivan Chamber to offer more opportunities for young people? Is that the answer?
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. Right now we have workforce development, which does an exceptional job placement. They're also being proactive. There's a CNA program to help out with the short-staffed nursing homes. There's a nursing program we're trying to expand. There's a trade group that workforce development's been working with right now. There's a welding trade going on in BOCES. There's a CDL class for truck drivers going on in the SUNY Sullivan. So we need to expand on these things. Carpenters, electricians, people who work with their hands, people who are in the trades that you have to have if you're going to be in an area where we are. You need carpenters, you need electricians, you need plumbers, you need heating specialists, you need truck drivers. So we're expanding on all these things through the county, and this is programs we've been working on for 4 years now. So I believe that we're handling it quite well, and it's received well. We graduated, I believe, out of 12, we graduated 8 students out of the carpentry program that they ran in BOCES, and 7 of them went to unions, and 1 of them is working at BOCES. So programs like that, I believe, are the way to keep some of these young kids here. Not everybody's cut out to go to college.
Ken Scott, your rebuttal on creating partnerships with local organizations, institutions for young people?
Yeah, we do. We have to maintain good partnerships and create new partnerships. I know that the Delaware Valley Job Corps in Callicoon is adding a CNA program to their program, and it's not just a residential program, it's a day program for county residents. That will certainly help. But yeah, we have to make sure that education is accessible, whether that's in trades or if it's in higher education. We talk about young people, but let's not forget about adults, right? We often think about young people as being teenagers or college age, but I went back to SUNY Sullivan as an adult, and I saw many other adults there, and having programming through SUNY Sullivan that is, 2-year program or a certificate program that will help meet some of the needs of the employers in the county would be very helpful. So yes, we have to protect these partnerships, and we also have to forge new partnerships. We have to do everything possible to make sure that our residents have access to education and training.
And Ken Scott, you get the next question, and I wanted to move on to some of the environmental issues facing the county right now. One is that Sullivan County is looking at solutions to transporting waste. A lot of waste gets transported out of the county at a significant cost. The legislature has looked at some public-private partnerships to deal with the solid waste issue. Would you support such an effort?
I would support an effort, but I would really want to vet any private company that's coming in, especially if they're making big promises. What we've seen in the past is this legislature has entertained entering into an agreement with Hughes Energy, which was an untried and untested method of taking care of garbage. They had a steam enclave, and there was a lot of problems with that. And I, among other people in the community, had reached out to other people throughout New York State who are facing this and discussed some of the issues about Hughes Energy. So anything that we do have to do something. This is an issue. Garbage is expensive. and it's not good for the environment. So I would be open to it, but like I said, we have to strongly vet it. I would also look into education about reducing garbage. We live in a world that's so disposable, and there are other programs out there where they are working on reducing waste. We can also work on, we have a really great recycling coordinator, working on educating the public about recycling. It's something that I do happily. I've actually used to collect cans and bottles for a local cat rescue because they use the money, those pennies add up to fund their efforts, and it was a great way to know that that was not being thrown out. Those bottles and cans were not going to end up in a landfill. So we have to really investigate and research and look at every avenue, because it is expensive, but it's also about protecting our environment. And we live in the beautiful countryside. We don't want to worry about what's happening in those landfills.
George Conklin, your rebuttal on the solid waste issue?
Yes, there's absolutely an issue. Seneca Meadows, which was a big hole in the ground, which if you stacked up the garbage that's in it now would tower over the Statue of Liberty. They are probably going to close in the next 2 years. Even if they weren't, it poses a big environmental issue because you have all these trucks. We take in our permits for 800 tons a day. In the summertime, there's trucks waiting to get in because we can't have any more than that on the floor per our permit. This all gets put in trucks, which then truck it up there, diesel, fumes. Obviously, there's the environmental impact of the garbage in the landfill, solid waste. We have instituted, took 3 years to get the permit from the DEC. We've instituted we have 400 bins that were given out as a pilot program for composting.
Well, and as a follow-up question to that, since I was going to ask about the pilot composting program, the goal is to actually create an in-county program. Do you feel that that's a positive? Are you in support of moving to large-scale composting here in Sullivan County? And would that also be able to bring in composting from other parts of the Mid-Hudson?
I don't know that would be the greatest issue because I think some folks might have a problem. I think we played the importation game once and filled up our landfill. I would say that to handle what we have here, if it's adequate to make it worthwhile, because there is a tipping point, our goal right now is to cut down on the tonnage that is being exported out of our county, because we pay by the ton to get rid of it. I think it's around $90 a ton now, and it's expensive. If we can cut down by 25 or 30% by composting, that's great. And there's also a market for the compost. Topsoil is a hard thing to get around here. If you're making your own, like many of the farmers I know do, a lot of people, they have their composting bins, you're making soil essentially. So I think it's a great idea. As far as the autoclave goes, we looked into it. All things are on the table. We've been to Covanta on Long Island, where they have I don't know if it's an autoclave or incinerator. They have a setup in the middle of Long Island, and this place is immaculate. And they process a lot of household waste through there. And quite honestly, I would sign up with them tomorrow. It's something that we're looking into because something has to be done, but there's always somebody who doesn't like how you go about it. As long as there's not a real bad environmental impact to the surrounding area, and you have a company with a proven track record, as Catherine alluded to, okay, if you have somebody that doesn't, fine, but we have somebody in Long Island, I would sign up with them tomorrow. And that, again, with the composting, knocks down your exportation dramatically.
Kat Scott, your rebuttal? Composting, and is that a big part of the answer?
Yeah, composting is wonderful. It's something that my parents used to do regularly, and as George said, farmers do it. Taking something that is organic and returning it to a state that it can be reused again is one of the greatest things that we can do. If we had a composting program that was successful here in Sullivan County, I don't see why it would be harmful to the idea of maybe importing. I mean, anything you do, you have to manage closely and carefully, and it has to be sustainable, meaning it has to work. So I would say, yeah, let's get our composting program up and going, and then we can explore other ways of utilizing that. Composting's fantastic.
Very good. So we're moving into the final segment of our debate here, and again, switching our order. I'm going to go back to you, George Conklin, talking a little bit about the issue of migrants. It's something that came up earlier this year, and it's Sullivan County's migrants came and went, of course. The issue is still in the headlines. Now, Governor Hochul has suggested that work permits allowing eligible migrants to contribute to the workforce. Would you support this and support migrants in the county workforce?
I would have to say that they call them migrants, okay, that's fine. I'm sure most of these folks are just people who want a better life, just like all the previous immigration that's come into this country. But the previous people who emigrated here, much like my lineage, they came through Ellis Island, they had sponsors, they were vetted. We don't know who these people are. And we have a process which is background checks, and you have to vet them. And these folks need to be vetted. New York City made themselves a sanctuary city, which created a huge problem, and now they want to share their problem with Sullivan County and the other 61 counties. This is not the way to do it. They should be vetted. I feel bad. There's a humanitarian issue. The folks are bust here, bust there. They don't know where they're going. That is a shame. As far as integrating them into the county workforce, unemployment here is as low as it can possibly be. We do need a workforce, but to just bring people in who are not vetted to make sure of who they are, I have a big problem with that. The reason they're not here now, we passed an emergency declaration, which is still in effect, because at that time we had 104 count of homeless people of our own people here in Sullivan County. To bring in 50 more people, you can't do it. We were at the max already. Do I feel for these people? Absolutely. Do I think that most of them are good people who would be good workers? Absolutely. As I said, they just want a better life, just like my lineage. But you have to vet these people. We don't know who they are. Nobody does. And I will stand strongly by that.
Very good. Kat Scott, your rebuttal and thoughts on migrants in the workforce?
Well, when the migrants were here several months ago, we don't have adequate housing for the folks in this country, or this county, who are experiencing a crisis, a housing crisis. So that's a big problem for me. We need to address that first before we can consider bringing in other people who need housing. We don't have what we need for the residents of Sullivan County. And right now, the current legislature is kicking that can down the road. We use hotels, and one of the big problems when the migrants arrived was they were put in a hotel where a baby had recently overdosed on fentanyl. To be honest, one of the reasons why they were moved from here is because it was a really bad look for the state. We need to address our housing crisis, and we need to address a safe place for families to go when they're experiencing a crisis. So that needs to be addressed first and foremost.
Well, Kat Scott, you get the next question, and I want to move into, of course, a topic that's a very big part of our economy, that's tourism. Mm-hmm. The bed tax funds were removed from the SCBA contract by the current legislature. They've been sitting in a bank account with no current plan to spend the money. The question is, how would you address those funds if you were to be elected as a legislator?
I have watched over the years what has happened with the contract for the Sullivan County Visitors Association and this tug of war over the bed tax money. The fact is that when former Senator John Bonasek and our current Assemblywoman Aileen Gunther, they created that law that law says that 5% of all of the money there's a 5% tax on people who come here to stay here to visit. That money has to go to tourism promotion, and it's written for one nonprofit. The shenanigans, as I like to call them, that has occurred over this money is shameful. We have a professional group of people in the Sullivan County Visitors Association who do a wonderful job marketing Sullivan County. They have branded us the Sullivan Catskills. And over the years, they have built this tourism in this county back. If many people don't remember, when all the resorts were dying, tourism was dying. And that's why this local law was created. We need to take that money, provide it to the Sullivan County Visitors Association, and let them do what they do best, and that's promote tourism in Sullivan County. It is not a slush fund for any of the legislators. It is not something that they can use to their discretion. The law is very clear how it is written. That money has to go to promote tourism in Sullivan County, period.
George Conklin, your rebuttal on the bed tax issue.
Yeah, she's correct about the law. The Sullivan County Visitors Association is a partner. They're a contract organization that contracts with the county, and in partnership with them, they promote the county, and they do a wonderful job. They work very hard at it. I remember when they only had a couple $100,000 budget. Last year, they received $2.4 million, and it's true, there is several $100,000 sitting there. We negotiated a contract with them, which is what they are, a contract organization, and they have gotten more money than they ever did. Now, there's a plethora of things you can use. You could blacktop and sidewalks is tourism, because if you have crappy roads and sidewalks you can't walk on, people aren't going to come here. So there's a broad spectrum of what it can be used on, and there is something in the works, and we have 2 RFPs, and they are going to receive more money than they ever had.
Very good. Well, George, you get the next question. Are you satisfied with the work of the Sullivan County Industrial Development Agency? And if not, what specifically do you propose to do about it?
We have restructured. Most importantly, I believe, is getting legislators off of the IDA, because it takes the politics out of it, I believe. They have done some very good projects. There's some that I wonder about, but at the end of the day, they're doing the best that they can. We have a lot more business people on the IDA now. They do work very hard to bring in industrial development. They are our partner, as well as the Visitors Association. There's also the Cornell Cooperative Extension. There's a lot of these groups that work with the county to bring people here. The Partnership for Economic Development. There's so many, our Sullivan County Planning Board. There's a bunch of them that work together. I believe the IDA does a good job. There's been some projects that I wasn't really in favor of, but overall I think they do a good job, and I couldn't say specifically anything I would change on it. They do try to bring people in, and they've worked. We had the Villaroma fire. They worked closely with them. We had 100+ employees displaced, and they worked closely with them to work out a pilot program so that they could function. And they also have worked with other facilities in the county to facilitate them keeping their employees, as we said, jobs. And I think that they've done a pretty good job.
Very good. Kat Scott, rebuttal on the Sullivan IDA. Your feelings about that?
Well, in full transparency, I do work for a company that did benefit from an IDA negotiation on a pilot program. But no, I don't think that the IDA is doing a service to the county. I think that when they're negotiating with companies, I think that we should be asking more for the Sullivan County residents and taxpayers. I think there's been some sweetheart deals that have gone out there, and yeah, I think it's something that we have to look at closely. Yeah, I'm not. I would say the IDA needs work.
Well, and you get the next question, Kat Scott. And as we wrap up here, a bit of a more general question. The new legislative maps are about to become official after this election cycle. So should you become a legislator in November and are successful, thinking about your district, do you feel that there are any specific priorities that might shift with the legislative district lines? What are some of the priorities that you would have for your district?
Well, District 5, as it will be starting January 2024, is a majority of the river corridor. It goes all the way from Long Eddy down past Narrowsburg, almost to Berryville. It's rural. It is underserved. So I think the priority in District 5 is really pushing for more services out in District 5. I've been out talking to people. One of the things that people have brought up to me was Sullivan does not go out to District 5. We need to increase that, increase other services that are provided more on the other side of the county, and really advocating hard for the folks out there. I think District 5 got the good end of the stick when it came to redistricting. I would not say the same for other districts. I was allowed opponent of all 3 legislative maps when they were redrawn, and was somebody who was advocating for additional maps. But like I said, District 5 makes sense.
Okay, good. George Conklin, your thoughts on your legislative district or the new district as of this January?
Well, the district represents more of what we are, which is a rural western river community. It didn't make sense to me to be going out into Liberty. If you go down, you got Town of Freemont, Delaware, Cochecton, most of Callicoon, and Tusten. Geographically, it's large, but it's also the smallest populace. You know, in districts 7 and 4, you could pretty much walk around the whole district in a day, where it's going to take half an hour to go from one end of District 5 to the other. As far as the busing and bringing stuff over there, that's something to be looked at to Callicoon, Narrowsburg area. We do have an aging population, people without vehicles. That is certainly something that we're looking at. We've expanded on Move Sullivan dramatically in the last 2 years, and that's something to be looked at for sure.
Well, George Conklin, that's going to wrap up our Q&A session. So we'll start with closing statements. 2-minute closing statement for you, George.
Okay. All right. I'd like to start off, or end, I should say, again, with thanking everyone for doing this and taking your time. In the Catskill Hudson, Mid-Hudson News, and the Black Library, and the Local 17, and yourself and Catherine for taking part in this. I'd just like to say that in my tenure, we've had no significant tax increases. We've paid off debt early. We have no short-term debt. We are campaigning, myself and my colleagues who are in the incumbency, on what we have done, not what we're going to do. And I think that speaks volumes about what we've accomplished. We have restructured much of the government to make it more streamlined, and listened to the department heads and tried to really be sensitive to their needs. We don't micromanage. We just try to give them the tools that they need to do their jobs. There's over 1,000 wonderful employees that work for Sullivan County. They do a fantastic job. I want to thank all of them. And only thing I could really say is that ideology cannot override reality. And that comes to the garbage problem, the IDA problem, if there was one, and all the other things that we've spoken about. And ideology can get you in a lot of trouble. You have to work in reality. And that's what we have done over the last 4 years. We've worked in reality. We've made some hard decisions. And we've looked into any way we could make things better and keep the tax burden off of the landowners. And like now, we're shifting it to a user tax, which is sales tax, which has eclipsed property tax in funding the budget. And closing, thank you, and let's all enjoy the natural beauty of this beautiful county.
Thank you, George Conklin. Kat Scott, 2-minute closing statement.
Again, I want to thank Mike for moderating this debate, Bold Gold Media and the Mid-Hudson News for hosting us, the Black Library for providing us with the space, and to George Conklin, my opponent, for his participation. It's very important to me that we provide the voters of District 5 with an opportunity to know their candidates and the issues so that they can make an informed choice on Tuesday, November 7th. To me, the choice is clear. This current legislature, which Mr. Conklin is a part of, has been chaotic and dysfunctional, and we can't afford another 4 years. Just to remind you that some of the things that have happened over the last 3.5 years was this legislature tried to merge the 911 center with the Sheriff's Department without consulting EMS or the firefighters, which caused a huge outcry from the fire department and EMS communities. Hired disgraced family court judge Mike McGuire to be the county attorney, have allowed Mr. McGuire to expand the powers of the county attorney's office that go beyond what the county charter allows, jeopardize elderly lives by destabilizing the care center and cause much unnecessary suffering. They've given away 22 acres of county land for $18 a year for a 120-year contract and a sweetheart deal up at the county's airport. They've used federal COVID relief money to pave the roads and to upgrade a heating system at the college instead of investing in mental health services and addiction services. The 4% energy tax, which was not very popular amongst the people of Sullivan County. There's been a lack of accountability at the care center. When elected, I will put my experience and knowledge and skills to work for the people of my district. I will advocate for stronger response to the opioid crisis, work to improve mental health services, work towards economic development focusing on good jobs for our local people, advocate and protect healthcare services on the western side of the county, work on expanding Move Sullivan to District 5. I need you to vote on November 7th. We need change in this county. And as Willie Nelson once said, if you don't like who's in there, then vote him out. That's what Election Day is all about. Thank you.
Well, that's going to wrap up our Decision 2023 debate for District 5. Again, thanks to Legislator George Conklin, who's running on the Republican line, and Kat Scott running on the Democratic and Sullivan United lines. Thanks very much for being a part of today's debate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for being a part of these Decision 2023 debates for Sullivan County Legislature, coming to you from the Black Library in Monticello. I'm Mike Sickel, News Director for Catskills News. I'd also like to thank our news partner, Mid-Hudson News, and of course, our candidates. Laborers Local 17 is a proud sponsor of Decision 2023. Visit liuna17.com to start on your career path today. Find these Decision 2023 debates on a number of platforms, including Catskills News Talk 92.5 and 94.9, as well as MidHudsonNews.com, plus Mid-Hudson News YouTube channel and the Catskills News podcast. Thank you for being a part of Decision 2023.